Hello, I'm John Feldt. This is the Weekly Water Outlook National Edition. Well, here's the jet stream pattern, and this has really been an unusually predominant pattern. Even though the ridge of high pressure typically develops over the western U.S. in summertime, this dip in the jet stream over the east is a bit more unusual, and this has been the pattern now for several weeks now, and it's been driving our precipitation patterns from June and now into July. And actually, sort of the rest of the story is I really don't see a whole lot of change to this pattern well into July. Now, I did want to show you some interesting weather over the last week. Over the southeast U.S., which has been very wet, the southeast U.S. tapped this moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, and you can see these white clouds here. These are strong thunderstorms, and when that's pulled up into the southeast U.S., you can get very heavy rain. You can also see, though, if you look closely, that some of the mid and high level energy, or the winds, the moisture I should say, came from the Pacific. So when you have Pacific moisture coming in from at mid and upper levels, and if you have low level flow coming in from the Gulf of Mexico, that's really a setup for extremely heavy rain. Here's a close-up of the moisture streaming in from the Gulf of Mexico on a satellite image, and if we look at radar, look at all these streaks. This is that typical inflow when you have high Gulf of Mexico moisture streaming inland. And look at this here. All these individual thunderstorm tracks streaking in. They're aligned right with the low-level flow. And here's your heaviest pulse of high moisture. That's all streaming into the southeast U.S. So if we look at precipitation over the last 7 days, what you can see here is that the heaviest rain was over the southeast U.S. The red is 5 inches of rain or more. You can even see some purple. And this is real typical of this type of pattern. You have the near shore heaviest pulse of rain. That's that rain I showed you pushing in. And then you have these little pockets of heavier rain over the higher elevations of the Appalachians. Now across the rest of the nation, it was actually pretty quiet. The blue is only up to a ½ inch of rain. So you can really see over the last 7 days, it's been a very active parts of the Ohio Valley and the southeast U.S. and pretty quiet over most of the rest of the nation. Now if we look at areas of winners and losers as far as precipitation, yellow are deficits of rainfall, and it looks like 1 to 3 inches of rain was lost over a broad part of the middle part of the nation. And anywhere from 1 to as much as 8 inches of rain were surplus over the southeast U.S. And if we look further out, the past 30 days, the trends become much clearer as far as winners, as far as surplus rain or deficits, and anywhere in the purple here are surplus amounts of rain, and anywhere in what we have here in yellow and red are deficits, and that's really where the drought impacts are occurring or expanding in areas where they have the yellow and red, and the flood vulnerability is increasing where we have purple. Now keep in mind, for the southeast U.S., is that soils are very wet. I'm going to show a soil moisture anomaly in just a bit. And rivers are high, and reservoir levels are also fairly high. So there is a vulnerability to tropical weather should a system move inland. Now look at the number of rain days. These are over the last 30 days. The area of green is anywhere from 15 to 20, and even some blue, 21 to 25 days out of the last 30. So areas in green, especially dark green and blue, have been very wet. Areas in brown have been very dry. Look over the western U.S. You've heard a lot of the problems over the southwest U.S. 0 days over the last 30 days. So it continues extremely dry with no rain whatsoever in those areas. Now if we look at the maximum consecutive dry days, areas of blue over the eastern U.S. anywhere from 0 to 5. So across the higher elevation of the Appalachians, that dark blue, it pretty much rained every day over the last 30 days. Over the western U.S., the areas in brown, 0 days over the last 30 days over the last 30 days. There's been no rain. And now we look at Texas and Oklahoma. That's getting into the 20 consecutive days or more of dry weather as well. So soil moisture anomalies, the areas in red are areas that are unusually dry. Areas in green are areas that are usually wet. And I'm going to try to just sort of draw here. Remember that pattern of the upper jet stream? Remember it sort of bowed up through this area and it came down through this area? Well, look at that. Those are those precipitation patterns. Areas that have been impacted by the high pressure have been unusually dry. Areas impacted by the upper trough of low pressure, unusually wet. So the drought monitor shows areas of drought. It typically does expand a bit in summertime, but due to the dry weather, it's beginning to expand quicker. Areas of D3 or extreme drought are in red. Areas of D4, exceptional drought, are in that dark red or maroon. And if we look at the top image there in the last 4 weeks, areas in yellow and brown are drought categories that are intensifying. So for much of the western U.S., drought is beginning to once again intensify, and in many cases is going from an area intensity that's been bad to a worse condition. Now, I mentioned a little bit about tropical weather. I will be looking at this more and more now that we're getting into the tropical season. Right now, the two things to sort of keep an eye on. The one, I've already mentioned, this moisture here in the Gulf of Mexico, and that's sort of brushing the Texas coast up into the southeast U.S., and that tap will eventually break this week, I think, and it won't be quite as much. We do have a system well out into the Atlantic, and I will talk a lot about steering flows, but right now it looks like this is very far out and a very strong east to west flow, which should keep it well to the south. Now, I will be keeping an eye on that. That could change, but it's way out there right now. So the jet stream this week, very similar to the last couple of weeks. We're getting into very quiet pattern, bulging ridge of high pressure, which is somewhat typical in the west for this time of year, area of low pressure in the east. And if we look at the 6 to 10 day, very similar type conditions. So the forecast for the next 7 days for rain, look at this, just what we've seen over the last couple of weeks. Dry over the south and the west with that area of ridging high pressure. Anywhere along that jet and over the eastern U.S., a better chance of rain. Especially this week, it looks like from the Carolinas up into Virginia, the heaviest amounts of rain. Now, soil moisture will be drying off out in areas of brown. Soil moisture will be increasing in areas of blue. Now, as we get to the 6 to 14 day forecast, here's the 6 to 10 day. I think, especially in summertime, the confidence level is somewhat low with this. So I'm sort of focusing on areas that I think are greater confidence. And I think as we get into the 6 to 10 day outlook, the greater confidence is that the southeast U.S. rain pattern looks like it's going to continue. And then as we get into the 8 to 14 day outlook, green is above normal precipitation. I think, again, that's most likely. So I think the most likely outlook is the northern part of the U.S. here with that jet, and then the southeast U.S. Now, this will be sort of interesting if this works out for increased precipitation over Texas in that time frame. Right now, some of the models are indicating it might, but I think it's a little bit uncertain to say at this time. So today's briefing takeaway points. It looks like it's going to be wet over the southeast U.S., but not quite as wet as expected or as we saw last week. It looks like the action spots will be North Carolina and Virginia with a continued above normal precipitation until further notice. Over the western and south U.S., it looks like, again, the same pattern will continue with very dry weather, no precipitation whatsoever throughout the week. Thanks for listening to this week's briefing. We'll be providing another briefing again next week.